So we're here with Chester. Chester, would you please introduce yourself?
My name is Chester Martinez. I'm 22 years old and I'm a performing artist from South Africa.
Because we met and obviously we told you about the project. Was there a particular person or story or image that resonated with you?
I mean, the project itself, before I even saw the book, resonated with me just on, what I heard about it from you guys. And then going through the book and looking at every individual, I must say, every individual was captured in such a way that I felt like I was getting to know them. Like I was meeting them. But the individual that I connected with most, his name is Philip. I read through his story a couple of times actually, and it was a really beautiful experience for me because it's not a common experience where I come across a book or a show on TV or anything really where I find human with whom I can relate, whose journey kind of mirrors mine, or where I find aspects of their gender identity that kind of gives me insight into my own identity, because I feel like my journey being from South Africa and being from a small, very conservative community in a rural town outside of Capetown has been quite an isolated experience. It's been quite separate from that of my peers and that of my family. And it's only happened in the last 2 years of my life when I've got to travel through work and through the connections I've made within the art world that I've really met individuals with any kind of semblance of similarity between myself and them. And reading about his absolute fluidity and how he's come to accept that he is just a completely androgynous human. He's had feminine features his whole life. Many people don't know whether he's boy or girl, and that's been very much my reality growing up as well. And he talks in his story about how when he was much younger and people thought he was a girl, it would upset him. And the same thing happened to me. I was mostly hung out with my female cousins and my female friends, and I was always treated as one of the girls. And I was like, I never identified as a girl, and I started feeling this pressure on myself to figure out, like, do I want to be a girl? And it was this whole thing of also just not having access to narratives of people who are transgender, not having open discussions where people touch on the topic of sexual identity and gender identity. It was just not something that was even a reality in my environment. It wasn't something that even my parents and elders knew anything about themselves. They were set in this binary system of male and female, and this is what makes a wife, this is what makes a husband, that kind of thing. So I just felt like I was on the fringe of my entire reality basically my whole life long. And to be able to open a book and read something like this and have a body of work that is just it's a compilation of stories of individuals who've had this journey outside of the norm. It's people who are transitioning, who have transitioned, young children, like Birdie in the beginning of the book. She's a young girl, and to be provided the space to have this liberated development, this open space to just become her truest self. It's the most beautiful thing to be able to engage with. And I think this book as a whole, it's such an important piece of work in the world, and I think it's going to be a tool for many people in their journey to self-realization and self-understanding and self-acceptance, which is things that are very important, because one of the worst things in my lived experience is feeling like you don't belong anywhere. And that can oftentimes come from not having a community that you belong to, not having a people that you belong to. And for too long now, and it's only really shifting now, like the fact that works like this is coming into existence it's part of the shift. But for too long, people who were other, people who were outside of the norm, didn't have any place to belong, and they just fell by the wayside. I had to take roots to their self-realization that weren't healthy, and I feel like that is not fair when our straight counterparts or people who fall within that binary understanding and that binary structure, when they just get to develop as accepted people, they just get to be themselves, they don't ever have to defend their reality. They don't ever have to defend their identity. And it is really, really, really beautiful. And I'm very grateful that you and Bernd have put in this much effort to create something this beautiful and this essential for the cause of giving people who fall outside of that binary still a voice and a tool for self-understanding. And yeah, I'm very grateful.
Well, thank you. Where do you think things are moving in perhaps Cape Town or your community, and maybe even South Africa?
Yeah.
Do you feel like this is a larger part of the conversation?
I feel like South Africa itself, on a massive scale, is still very, very, very conservative. Majority of the communities in this country are still very much in that binary, still very much accept that binary structure. In my experience, in a place like Cape Town, there aren't almost any spaces that are open to the queer community, that are open to people who don't identify as what is understood. You'll find a much more liberated scene in Johannesburg, where there's a massive creative hub. It's a much bigger city, so the creatives have been able to reclaim more spaces and kind of make more noise on a bigger scale. But even in Joburg, it's still very much binary. And I think Cape Town, it's not just Cape Town, South Africa, and in the bigger conversation, South Africa is in need of what I would like to call like almost a gender revolution, like things that happened in New York in the 90s, the club scene, the spaces that were reclaimed and the spaces that were opened up and occupied by the queer community and the LGBTQI community. That is still necessary in South Africa. That still needs to happen. It hasn't yet happened. The spaces for people in the queer community are still way too limited. There isn't much of a queer voice in South Africa. I mean, there are many queer artists. There are people doing amazing things, but most of us who have platforms and voices are only recognized overseas and only kind of given that recognition, given those platforms to speak overseas, where it is more understood, where there's more of an open discussion around it, where there are already established movements that you can add to. I feel like there's very much a sense of bringing what's happening in the world to South Africa, stirring the pot here. Things are still way too safe and calm. And I mean, I understand that we still a very young democracy. Like, apartheid was only a few years ago. So there's still so much healing that is necessary regarding that. But like, we can't wait for that to happen, because then we're going to wait. I think we're going to wait forever. It can't be a case of waiting for people to deal with the racial issue before we touch on the gender identity issue. It's a time of addressing social injustices, and we need to address as many as possible so that we can get to the resolution as soon as possible. And I think on a big scale, it's just something that still very much needs to be introduced to the general public in the consumer market. It's not something that is widely understood in South Africa, and it's not something that is even really discussed. And I know we're very far off because it's something that isn't discussed in many first world countries yet. It's more just like we just need to start something. People who identify as other need to become more confident in their identity and kind of exist in that space, because that is what I've chosen to do, is be the change that I want to see. When I can't always connect with someone sitting at a table like this, having an open dialogue or discussion, I choose to then use my aesthetic, my fashion as a language, and I will walk down the streets of Cape Town in heels and get stares and get people. I'll rather make people uncomfortable, or I'll do something, I'll make them uncomfortable and make them ask questions, because they're not going to come out of their own volition and sit and ask you, what are you about? It's too easy for them to just ignore it. If it's not affecting them, then they can just ignore it. We need to start affecting people and saying that we are here. Yeah, did I answer the question?
Yes. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I really and truly think this is an incredible piece of work, and the heart and soul that has gone into this, the fact that you guys are in every city that you find yourself in, you seeking these people, and you guys have made yourself allies to a cause where we need allies outside of our community, because our community is a minority. There isn't much change we can affect alone. And the fact that you guys have used your resources and used your experience and your joint efforts to really give so many people a voice, and I feel give so many people to look up to and people to aspire to be like. It's really such beautifully done work, and it's so incredibly powerful, and I'm just really, really grateful that I'm starting to see things like this exist in the world.
Well, thank you very much.
Such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.